Welcome to the Deep Dive. You're joining us as we explore a really pivotal moment in bringing new medicines to the world.
Yeah, that leap, right, from a promising lab discovery to actual full-scale manufacturing.
Exactly. I mean, think about it. A chemical reaction perfected in a tiny flask suddenly needs to be replicated in reactors, what, thousands of times larger?
It's a huge jump, and it matters so much because, well, without mastering the scale-up, those early breakthroughs, they just stay breakthroughs on paper. They don't actually reach pharmacies.
That's a really key point. You're talking about a transformation where the chemistry itself, elegant on a small scale, suddenly faces all these new challenges as the quantities just explode.
Precisely.
Mm.
And for our listeners who want to grasp the core issues, but maybe without getting totally bogged down in excessive detail, this is really what this deep dive is for.
Right. We've tried to distill the essential stuff from, well, a whole range of sources, from high-level strategy guides down to the real nitty-gritty of pharmaceutical science.
To shine a light on the crucial things to consider and also the potential hazards, in that scale-up journey.
So our mission today is to give you a clear understanding of what it really takes to make this jump successfully. We're focusing on, I guess, three main pillars.
Sounds about right.
Okay, so a really solid understanding of the chemical process itself, making smart choices about the equipment for the job, and having a deep appreciation for how things like reaction kinetics and thermodynamics behave in these massive systems.
Absolutely critical areas.
And we'll also keep an eye out for any clues in our sources about how specific drugs, maybe like gastrozole or lorlatinib, actually navigated this stage. So consider this your shortcut, yeah, to understanding a part of drug development that's often behind the scenes, but is just, well, fundamental.
Let's do it. Where should we start? Process understanding.
Yeah, let's unpack that. Why is understanding the process at that fundamental level even more crucial when you're going big?
Well, what's fascinating here is how these subtle behaviors of molecules, things you might barely notice at lab scale, they get magnified and potentially become real problems as you scale up.
Okay.
So a cornerstone of this process understanding is really getting to grips with the solid state properties of the actual drug substance.
Solid state proper, like how the drug exists as a solid.
Exactly. The way a molecule arranges itself in its solid form. Is it a specific crystal structure that's called a polymorph, or does it incorporate solvent molecules, making it a solvent? Or maybe it forms a salt. These things can have, well, profound effects.
Profound how? What kind of effects are we talking about?
Big ones. We're talking about impacting how well it dissolves in the body, its stability over time, and even how easily it can actually be processed into a pill later on.
Huh. So it's almost like the same Lego bricks can be clicked together in different ways, and those different arrangements end up having totally different properties.
That's a perfect analogy, yeah. And here's where a potentially huge pitfall comes in. Imagine you've developed your whole lab process around one specific crystal form.
All right,
Right.
go on.
Then as you start scaling up, maybe in a bigger reactor with different conditions,
Right.
you suddenly discover a new, more stable polymorph starts forming.
More stable sounds good, though. Isn't stability what you want?
You'd think so, but more stable often means it dissolves much more slowly. So this new form could actually make your drug much less effective once it's in the body.
Ah, okay. So your super strong Lego castle keeps collapsing because the bricks are slightly different when you build it bigger.
Exactly like that. And finding that out late in development,
Mm.
that can cause massive delays, a real timeline killer, like you said earlier, and a huge financial hit.
Wow. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. Okay, so polymorphism is one big thing. What other aspects of the chemical process really need that closer look during scale up?
Another really critical area is the interplay between anhydrous, meaning water-free, and hydrated or water-containing forms of a drug.
Right, water content.
Yeah, the ability of a drug molecule to kind of grab onto or lose water molecules
Mhm.
can dramatically affect both its bioavailability, how its drug actually gets into the bloodstream, and its long-term stability on the shelf.
Okay.
So understanding and controlling those transitions, especially under the different conditions you might find in large-scale manufacturing, is just vital for ensuring you get consistent product quality every time.
It's like needing to know if your building materials are going to warp or change shape depending on the humidity.
That's a good way to put it.
Yeah.
So even something seemingly simple, like the presence or absence of water,
Mhm.
can really throw a wrench in the works if you're not careful.
Okay, got it. Polymorphs, hydrates, anything else under this process understanding umbrella?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
We definitely need to talk about the art and science of crystallization, getting the crystallization process right. Well, It's described as a complex balancing act.
Complex.
It has huge implications for, like, everything. The cost of making the drug, the safety of the process, the drug's actual effectiveness, and just how easy it is to handle and process the final drug substance.
So getting the crystals right matters a lot.
Oh, massively. Think about it.
Yeah.
Nice, well-formed crystals are easier to filter, easier to dry, easier to handle downstream. They might even reduce the need for, say, energy-intensive milling steps later.
Okay.
But maybe more importantly, the actual size and shape of those crystals can directly influence how the drug behaves in the body when the patient takes it.
How so?
Well, a poorly controlled crystallization might give you tiny, dusty particles that are really difficult to handle safely, or maybe it gives you large, irregular crystals that just don't dissolve properly once they're ingested.
Right. Affecting bioavailability again.
Exactly. So really deeply understanding all the factors that influence how those crystals form, temperature, solvent, mixing speed, cooling rate, all of it is just paramount for a smooth and successful scale-up.
So that deep understanding of the process that then feeds directly into the next big thing, right? Equipment selection.
Precisely. Because moving from, a little beaker on a lab bench to a tank the size of a small car, well, isn't just a matter of multiplying everything by 1,000, is it?
I'm guessing not.
Not at all. Lab equipment is usually designed for small volumes, thinking about ease of use for a chemist, maybe.
Yeah.
It often just doesn't translate well to the challenges of larger scales.
Right. What kind of challenges?
Well, heat transfer, for one, becomes a major hurdle, a reaction that generates a bit of heat. You can easily cool that in a small lab flask surrounded by an ice bath, maybe.
Sure.
But in a huge reactor, that same amount of heat proportionally can build up really fast. If you can't remove it efficiently, you risk dangerous runaway reactions, or maybe just forming unwanted impurities because it got too hot.
Okay. That sounds serious.
It is. And
Right.
mixing, too. Getting uniform mixing throughout a vast volume, that needs specialized equipment like specific impeller designs and motor power.
Yeah.
It's way beyond a simple magnetic stir bar.
Right. You need everything reacting consistently.
You do. Ensuring consistent reaction conditions, temperature, concentration, mixing throughout the entire batch is crucial for maintaining product quality. And of course, safety protocols just become exponentially more critical when you're dealing with industrial quantities of chemicals.
So how do companies actually bridge that gap? How do they handle the jump in scale when it comes to the actual hardware, the equipment?
Yeah, so this is where the idea of a pilot plant becomes really invaluable.
A pilot plant, like a smaller version of the final factory.
Kind of. Think of it as a crucial intermediate stage. It's a testing ground, somewhere between the lab bench and full-scale commercial manufacturing.
Okay.
By running the reactions at a scale that's bigger than the lab, but still smaller than full production, companies can identify and sort out potential issues. Problems related to equipment performance, process parameters,
Yeah.
find them before committing to those massive investments in the final plant.
That makes sense. Test the waters first.
Exactly. And the key thing is that the equipment you choose, both for the pilot plant and then for the eventual commercial facility, it has to be directly aligned with those critical process parameters you identified earlier during that deep dive into process understanding.
Ah, it all links back.
Yeah, it has to. You need to be sure that the reactors, mixers, pumps, heat exchangers, whatever you choose, that they are actually capable of reliably maintaining the necessary conditions for a safe, efficient, and consistent reaction.
It really sounds like a significant upfront investment in planning and, well, infrastructure is absolutely necessary. You can't just wing it.
No, definitely no. And the facility itself plays a critical role too, especially in what's called a GMP environment, good manufacturing practice.
Right. The quality standards.
Yeah. The actual design of the manufacturing building is paramount to prevent things like contamination or mix-ups between different products or batches.
How's
Well, everything from the flow of materials and people through the building to how different processing areas are segregated. It's all carefully considered to support the scaled-up process and ultimately guarantee the quality and safety of the final drug product.
Wow. Okay, so process understanding feeds equipment selection, and the facility design supports both. What about the underlying chemistry itself? You mentioned kinetics and thermodynamics earlier. How do they change with scale?
That's a great question. And yeah, they become much more influential, much more visible, let's say, at scale. Reaction rate, that's the kinetics part, and the position of equilibrium, which is thermodynamics. Both can be affected by just changing the scale.
How?
Well, think about that heat transfer issue again. As the size of your reactor increases, the surface area available for heating or cooling doesn't increase as fast as the volume inside. That surface area to volume ratio actually decreases. So that can impact the efficiency of anything that relies on surface interactions, maybe certain types of catalysts. Or, again, it directly impacts your ability to get heat into or more often out of the system effectively.
So a reaction that's like lightning fast in a test tube might actually take significantly longer or maybe overheat in a huge reactor just because the heat can't get in or out quickly enough.
Precisely. Or it might run too slowly if it needs heat input.
Hmm.
And this is where really understanding the thermodynamics, basically, does the reaction release heat or consume heat, is absolutely crucial.
Especially the heat-releasing ones, I imagine, exothermic.
Exactly. Exothermic reactions, the ones that release heat, pose a much greater risk at larger scales. If that heat isn't removed efficiently, the reaction temperature can just skyrocket.
Leading to?
Well, best case, maybe just formation of unwanted, potentially dangerous byproducts because side reactions kick off at higher temperatures. Worst case, runaway reactions,
Yep.
pressure buildup, even explosions.
Yikes.
Yeah. And this really highlights the absolute necessity of having robust process control and monitoring systems in commercial manufacturing. You need sensors, automated controls, safety interlocks, all designed to keep those critical factors like temperature, pressure, addition rates within very tight, safe operating ranges.
So it's not just about making a lot of the drug, it's about doing it safely and getting the same quality batch after batch after batch.
Yeah, it's the essence of it, consistency and safety at scale.
Now, we mentioned earlier possibly looking for examples like gastrozole and lorlatinib. Did our sources happen to give any specific details about how the synthesis of those particular drugs was successfully scaled up? Any war stories?
Unfortunately, the specific nitty-gritty details about this scale-up for gastrozole and lorlatinib weren't really elaborated on in the materials we looked at for this deep dive.
Okay. Shame.
It is, but the broader point here is still incredibly important. The pharmaceutical industry, well, it relies heavily on the accumulated knowledge from countless successful and sometimes unsuccessful scale-up stories over the decades.
Learning from experience.
Exactly. So while we don't have the specifics of those two examples right here today, the principles we've been discussing, that critical importance of deep process understanding, careful equipment selection tailored to the scale, and that thorough grasp of kinetics and thermodynamics, they're all informed by those successes, by that collective experience.
Okay.
Studying how others have navigated these challenges, even if it's internal company knowledge sometimes, provides invaluable lessons and helps establish the best practices for bringing new medicines to patients effectively.
So even without the specific blow-by-blow for those drugs, the framework we've kind of built up here is based on the collective wisdom of the industry tackling these very issues over and over.
Precisely. And that collective experience has also definitely highlighted some common pitfalls, things that frequently trip people up during scale-up.
Okay, let's talk pitfalls. What are some of the typical headaches that drug developers run into when they try to move to large-scale production?
Well, one really frequent issue is the sudden appearance of unexpected impurities.
Impurities, where do they come from?
They can arise from subtle changes in reaction conditions, maybe slightly longer reaction times, or slightly different temperature profiles in a big reactor compared to the lab flask. Or they might come from the materials used to build the larger reactors, leaching something tiny. Even slight variations in the quality of the raw materials can sometimes lead to byproducts that were completely insignificant, maybe even undetectable, at the smaller lab scale.
Huh. So stuff you didn't even know was there can suddenly become a problem.
Right. And then just maintaining consistent product quality across these vastly larger batches is another significant hurdle. Even with really well-defined processes and sophisticated equipment, minor variations can creep in, ensuring that every single batch meets the rigorous quality standards that demands incredibly meticulous monitoring and control systems.
And we talked about this earlier, but those solid-state properties, the crystals and hydrates, they can also cause headaches again at larger scales, can't they?
Well, absolutely. As we discussed, maybe the crystallization process behaves slightly differently at scale, leading to changes in polymorphism, or maybe the drying process leads to a different hydrate form, or even just subtle shifts in the particle size distribution.
And that matters because
Because it can have a significant impact on the drug's performance in the body, right?
Yeah.
Its bioavailability, its stability, even how it gets formulated into the final pill or capsule. What worked perfectly in a small lab batch might suddenly exhibit completely different characteristics when you produce it at commercial scale.
So you might have to reformulate everything.
Potentially. And we also mustn't forget the escalating safety risks. You're handling much, much larger volumes of potentially hazardous chemicals, solvents, intermediates. So implementing really robust safety protocols, engineering controls like ventilation and containment, and having solid emergency procedures is just paramount.
Makes sense.
And then finally, even if you overcome all the technical chemistry and engineering challenges, the regulatory agencies are watching closely.
Ah, the regulatory hurdles.
Yeah. They meticulously scrutinize any changes made to the manufacturing process during scale-up, because any change could potentially affect the safety or efficacy of the final drug. You have to prove that the scaled-up process delivers equivalent product.
So, wow, scaling up really isn't just a feat of engineering, is it? It's this complex interplay of chemistry, engineering, safety, quality control, and regulatory compliance all woven together.
That's a very astute summary.
Yeah.
Yeah, it truly demands a holistic approach and just unwavering attention to detail at absolutely every stage.
Okay. So as we kind of wrap up our deep dive into this really critical stage of drug development, what are the absolute key takeaways, the main considerations you'd want to leave our listeners with about successfully scaling up chemical synthesis?
I think the crucial elements boil down to these.
Yeah.
First, a really comprehensive, fundamental understanding of the chemical process itself, knowing its ins and outs intimately.
Yeah.
Second, a strategic and informed selection of equipment that is genuinely fit for purpose at the required scale. And third, a thorough grasp of how the reaction kinetics and thermodynamics are going to behave in those larger systems so you can ensure both efficiency and safety. Those three pillars.
It's definitely clear that while it's often unseen by most of us, the ability to successfully scale up chemical synthesis is an absolutely essential step, and frankly, an incredibly complex one in making new and potentially life-saving medicines available to people.
Indeed it is. And, considering all the intricate details we've touched on today, everything from that subtle dance of molecules arranging themselves in different crystal forms to the immense engineering challenges of building and running industrial-scale reactors and managing that delicate balance of chemical reactions at huge volumes. What does that tell you?
Tell me about.
About the sheer dedication, the incredible effort, the layers of complexity that go into bringing even a single, seemingly simple pill to the pharmacy shelf. And maybe, what further questions does this deep dive spark in your mind about that whole incredible journey a drug takes? From that initial spark of discovery all the way to ultimately reaching the patients who need it.